Tonight's story begins with a woman returning to her seaside hometown, a place she swore she'd never see again. Decades ago, a summer friendship ended in fire. A girl in white, a blue ribbon, a matchbox. Now, as the waves whisper and the apples ripen, she sees that same girl standing beneath the old tree, because some fires never go out. Welcome to Nightmare Proof, where true horror comes alive. Here, you'll hear real stories of the strange, the disturbing, and the unexplainable. Turn down the lights, get comfortable, and prepare to face the darkness. What I left on the hill, I never thought I'd come back here. The town is smaller than I remember, and it was never large to begin with. Everything is quieter now, like someone turned down the volume a few steps. Since it's autumn, the beach hasn't been cleared for potential swimmers and families. Piles of red and blackened seaweed, tangled with empty seashells, frame the waterline, bringing with it the exact same smell of salt and fish and decay. At least that's the same. I only went back because I wanted to see it again. My children are flown out and my husband passed away a few weeks ago. Prostate cancer, of all things, and I just needed some comfort. I've been lonely. I had a dream about her, too. She was sitting under the apple tree, the big one, with her hair sticking to her face. That playful smile plastered across her face, like she'd just won over me in some game she made up. We both knew she had cheated. I found a very nice rental. They're quite easy to come by, especially in the off-season. I can see the red roof tiles of the yellow house from my bedroom window. They're not the same ones, of course. They rebuilt it after the fire. You'd never know a child died there. I can see my old house, too. It looks the same, except refreshed, newer than it was. There's a trampoline in the front yard, and a set of swings for small children. It's comforting to know that a child may be sleeping in my old bedroom. A fresh coat of paint on the walls and posters plastered up with tack. Books on a shelf. I would have loved that. When it was mine, the ceiling would leak when it rained. It smelled of damp rather than fresh paint or cleaner. I couldn't keep books in there. Back then, and I guess now, the town was dead 9 months out of the year. The adults used to joke that we only woke up when the tourists started arriving in the middle of June, right before midsummer. That's when the restaurants stayed open more than 2 days a week, when the souvenir shops on the pier stopped looking abandoned. The local grocery became well-stocked with fruits and vegetables that weren't local apples, or cabbage and potatoes. My father was away for work in Norway most of the year, but he'd return for the summers. Had a little booth at the pier where he sold snacks and balloons. Always came home smelling of popcorn, warm cotton candy, and cigar smoke. I think he was nicer to the tourists' children than his own. I don't think my mother wanted children, yet she ended up with 3 of us. She and my father hardly spoke, and that summer wasn't any different. He was too busy with work and other women, I assume, and she was too busy with my baby brother and sister. There were 7 years between me and my sister, making her 3, and 10 between me and my brother. That summer, they didn't make for good playmates. Not later either, but for other reasons. I was never a popular child. Not to say I was bullied either, or that the other children were mean to me. I joined in on the games, tag or hide and seek, but I was never picked first. I had to remind the others I was there. Overall, I felt pretty invisible. I didn't mind much, or I'd like to pretend that I didn't. Between our house and the yellow one next door was a small patch of what in the summer became overgrown grass and wildflowers with a small circle of trees, half-fenced and useless to any developer. It wasn't big enough to build anything on, and the lot was oddly shaped. It just sat there, forgotten, humming with bees in the summer and turning gray and stiff in the winter. I spent a lot of time there. I used to bring a blanket and a library book, sometimes an apple, and sit under the biggest birch. It was the only place that felt mine. My mother didn't care where I was or what I did, as long as I was back before dinner. And I am not sure my dad remembered I existed at all. No one else bothered with the place, not even the other children. The grass was high enough to hide in. I remember lying there, watching the sky through the stems, feeling like the world outside of my sanctuary was paused. That nothing mattered but the clouds and me. That we were the most important things, the only things in the universe. One day, I found a nest. It was lower than they usually are, in the space where a broken branch met the trunk. It was beautifully woven out of twigs and straw, a red plastic twine braided into the complex shapes. Inside, 3 eggs, small and blue with dark specks, each one unique. The most beautiful things I had ever seen. I remember holding my breath as I leaned in closer, afraid even that would break them, inspecting. It felt as if it was all for me, and made my little clearing all the more magical. I checked on them every day. I never touched them, didn't even dare to put my hands on the branch to get a better look. I just stood on my tippy toes, counted them, and whispered to them. About what I'd eaten, the book I was reading, how I hated hearing my brother's cries through the wall, how lonely I felt, that I was rooting for them. It felt like the best kind of secret. After, I'd always go to the yellow house. Its garden, filled with bird baths and apple trees and worn rocks, felt like an extension of the magic. I'd just walk around, touching the trees, pretending I was the daughter of a rich family that loved me, and that one day the house would be mine. I would live there with my husband and eat freshly baked scones with jam on the white deck, watching my daughters climb the old apple tree. The routine was the same almost every day, and I usually ended it with sitting on the little hill behind the yellow house, right where it met the forest. It was overgrown with wild strawberries and smelled fresh of pine and birch, hiding the stench from the ocean. It was perfect for rolling down, if you didn't mind the grass stains. One day, I was laying on my stomach in the grass at the top of the hill. The sun was starting to set, and I was watching a line of black ants cross my arm. It tickled. I had just decided to take a break from popping wild strawberries onto long pieces of dry grass when I heard the humming. Just a soft sound carried atop the wind, but it was enough of a break in my routine to startle me when I noticed it. There was a girl standing underneath the old apple tree, looking up at the branches. Her hums sounded distracted, and she looked as if she was thinking very hard about something. She wore a white dress with light blue trim, the sort that looked too nice to be running or climbing in, and her shoes had silver buckles. She had 2 neat plaits down her back, both tied with matching blue ribbons. I was instantly very jealous, but also intrigued. Her hands were clasped behind her back, politely, and I remember I didn't think she belonged there, amongst the overgrowth. She tilted her head when she saw me, and I froze. No one ever came here, and it felt like I was being caught doing something private and unjust. Then, she smiled and raised her hand in a wave, excitedly. Skipping, she made her way toward the hill, hands still behind her back. "Hi," she said, lacking even an ounce of shyness. I didn't know anyone else played here. I didn't answer right away. I sat up, tried brushing the grass and strawberry stains off my pants, crossed my arms. "It's not really a place for play," I said carefully, my cheeks flashing hot. "I just like sitting here." "Oh, that's where I sit too." I almost told her it wasn't, but decided to just avert my gaze instead. "My name's Clara," she said, unclasping her hands and resting them on her waist. "Do you live close by?" I nodded, and she started making her way up the hill, not seemingly caring that her dress was about to go from white to green and red. I said nothing. She plopped down next to me and exhaled. "It's the only place that feels mine," she said. From that day on, she remained. It happened gradually. I can't remember we ever said we were friends, but that's what we became. Some days, she'd be sitting under the apple tree in the mornings when I arrived, with her knees drawn up, her brushed hair reflecting the morning sun. Other days, she'd come skipping down the road from the yellow house when I was in the clearing, calling my name. The days fell into a new pattern. We'd meet in the mornings, explore the gardens, climb the hill, make daisy crowns, and lie in the grass until we both smelled like green. She talked constantly. About the city, her school, her parents who let her have her own record player. I mostly listened. She liked deciding what we'd do, and I was happy following along. She was really good at making up games, and equally good at changing or omitting rules so that she'd win. It didn't bother me. I liked being chosen. Sometimes, I'd catch her looking at me with a little frown in the corner of her mouth, as if she was puzzling something out. Other times, she'd go quiet in the middle of a story, distracted, then laugh again like nothing happened. She was a little odd that way, but I didn't mind. I finally had a friend. Eventually, I brought her with me to the clearing. That's when it all started going wrong. The air that day was hot and thick to breathe. The sky looked bleached and dappled. We had spent the morning running around the apple tree, looking at flowers, and rolling down the hill until my hair was full of seeds and her dress was no longer white. She laughed the whole time. I remember I didn't think it was possible to laugh that much about something so normal. That surely she must have done more exciting things than the simple rolling down a hill at the edge of the forest. When we lay in the grass, afterward, I told her about the clearing, about how magical it felt to me, how no one else was ever there, about the nest with the little blue eggs, and how I was certain they would soon hatch. How I felt almost like a mother, but in a magical way. That I whispered my secrets to the eggs, and I made some story up about your wishes coming true if you told them to the eggs before they hatched. I don't remember why. I think at that point, I wanted something to be mine, to try and be the driver, to make our relationship feel more equal. Maybe I owed her a little bit. She propped herself up on one elbow, looked at me with the widest eyes. "You'll show me?" she asked. I nodded, a combined sense of pride and nervousness enveloping me all at once. We walked there together, pinkies intertwined. My heart felt full, and there was excitement in the air. I remember how careful I was, brushing the branches aside to show the nest in the cradle, ensuring she'd see how gentle I was. The eggs looked the same. 3 perfect blue ovals tucked between the straw and the single red twine. Then the air felt like it deflated. "Is that it?" she said, one eyebrow raised. I suddenly felt cold. I looked away, shrugged, didn't know what to say. Clara stared at the eggs, then at me. I felt her eyes burn into the side of my face. She stood up on her tippy toes, raised a finger toward the eggs. "Don't!" I said, grabbing her arm. I pulled it gently, but she continued the movement anyway. Her finger traced the side of the straw, gave it a little push. "The eggs," rumbled. "They're just eggs," she said, and sighed. "Who cares? Let's go swimming instead." She pulled her hand back, letting the branches go. They slapped against the nest. Then she skipped out of the clearing. I followed her. What else could I do? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the little baby birds, pink and helpless, flightless, right underneath their shells, alive and waiting, unaware. A big finger, its tip covered in strawberry juice, right outside the thin veil. They didn't know. When I went back the next morning, it was all wrong. The branch was snapped at the crotch. The nest hung by a thread of straw. The red twine snapped in half because of some force. 2 of the eggs had fallen in the dirt. One of them cracked open. In the breaks of the shell, I could see the thin membrane peeled back like wet paper. Inside was something that should have stayed hidden pink and half-formed, unfinished, tiny bones shining white through where the ants had begun. The other was crushed flat, speckled blue shards in a mess of red and yellow and sticky that made my stomach churn. The last egg was still in the nest, barely hanging on. Its shell was split down the middle, along a thumb-shaped hole. The insides had congealed in the night air, and a single feather was stuck to the sticky mess, twitching as the wind passed through. I was certain I could hear the mother bird above, crying. I stood there, shaking. My stomach felt hollow, but I didn't cry, not right away. The clearing was quiet and still, except for the buzzing of flies right next to my ear. Later that afternoon, I found Clara sitting on the steps of the yellow house, swinging her legs and eating an apple. It was the same shade of red as the remnants of my birds. "Where have you been?" she asked, her tone harsher than usual. I could tell she was annoyed with me. I shrugged, didn't look at her. Plopped down next to her on the stairs, my hands clasped in my lap. "Something happened to the birds?" she continued, sympathetically. I flinched, My eyes locked to her face. "How did you know?" I gasped. Tears started welling up then. I could see the birds whenever I blinked, and it was just so sad. "Well, you shouldn't be running around telling people about stuff like that. You know what boys are like. I didn't tell anyone." "Yes, you did? When we played hide and seek with the boys yesterday, I told you it was a bad idea. I didn't argue with her. I never did. But that night, I thought about her words, turning them over and around until it made even less sense than the first time. I hadn't told anyone else. I knew I hadn't. Still, when I saw the boys on the beach the next day, they smiled strangely at me. One of them mimicked flapping wings with his arms, then made a crushing motion between his palms. When I told Clara, she just shrugged. "See? I told you they'd find out. Boys ruin everything." Something inside me cracked then, small but permanent. After that, she started wanting to spend more and more time with the other children. I'd see her running barefoot across the sand, shouting and laughing and roughhousing, with her dress hoisted up until it was later replaced by a pair of shorts and shirt tied at the waist, like the older tourists. She didn't look my way as often, and eventually she stopped calling for me in the morning. She was never at the house when I arrived, and eventually I stopped coming too. When she finally came by again, a week later, it was already August. It hadn't rained for a long while, and everything had turned yellow and dry. The grass was crunchy beneath her feet when she ran at me that morning. The sun was already high. I had to squint to see her. She talked fast, like she always did when she wanted to control the air between us, and pulled me along. I mostly followed because of habit, letting her drag me toward the garden. She ensured we kept a large distance to the clearing, and neither of us looked at it when we passed. As we made our way toward the hill, I felt hopeful. The last few weeks had been right back as they were before Clara, and I wasn't used to the lonely anymore. It felt nice to hear her voice again. Maybe everything could just go back to the way it had been before. Instead, she pulled a small tin box from the pocket of her shorts. It was colored blue, initials etched into the lid. My father's matchbox, the one he used to light his cigars. "I'm bored," she started, smiling expectantly at me. "Let's play something new, just for us." Unease hit me like a brick, but I sat down next to her anyway. Right at the top of the hill, where the roots of the trees were peeking through and the ground was bare, we would both get scolded for getting dirt on our clothes. Clara opened the matchbox, poured the sticks into her palm, rolled them between her fingers, the smile never fading from the corner of her lips. She didn't look straight at me. "Watch," she said, and struck one. The spark jumped, and a small flame bloomed at the end, licking orange before turning blue at the base. She brought it close to her face, eyes wide with delight. I could barely breathe. "Clara, don't. You'll burn yourself." She laughed, the easy laugh that felt like it was made for me to feel smaller. "It's fine. See? It's just a bit of fire." She started talking about cavemen, but I wasn't listening. The match was burning down, fast, and my eyes were glued to it. Every muscle in my body was tensed. When it reached the tip of her finger, she yelped and let go of the match. It landed soundlessly in the dry grass. A thread of smoke immediately started rising from it, curling its way up from between the blades. She stomped it out with her bare foot, smile growing wider. "See? Nothing." But she didn't stop. Another strike, another flare, small whiff of sulfur, mixing with the dry, scent of the field and the forest. Each one she threw a little sooner, a little brighter, a little closer to where the driest part of the weeds was. "Clara, stop!" I begged. "Only kids think playing with matches is cool." She ignored me, crouching low, watching intently as what little wind there was pushed the embers sideways. That's when I told her she was going home, that she was being stupid, that I would get in trouble, and I did not want that. She didn't even look at me, just laughed, and struck another match. I turned and started walking away, down the hill toward home. I didn't run, though I wanted to. I could feel the sun burning against the back of my neck, and my throat felt tight. I remember hearing the match strike again, and the smell of smoke, the faint hiss that followed, then nothing more. By then, I was too far away. I didn't see what happened after. I didn't. But sometimes, when I think about it, I can still picture how it must have gone. How she would have crouched down to light another, hair falling forward, the blue ribbon just a little too close to the flame on the ground. How the dry grass might have finally caught this time, quietly at first, and faster than expected. She would just think it was a whisper of smoke, but it was so dry. How the flame would have turned sideways, caught into an old thistle, her ribbon resting right on it. Then, poof. How her white shirt would have stuck to her back with sweat. How she might have stood up too fast, panicked, knocking the tin box over. How the wind would have done the rest. The next thing I remember is the smell of wood fire and my mother shouting my name from our porch. How the sky, there in the horizon, was orange. The black, thick smoke that crept over from the hill in a messy line, like a tornado drawn on paper. People were running and shouting, pointing. I never went up that hill again. I also didn't go home. I went to the clearing instead, sat down next to the tree where my baby birds had been, where I could still see small pieces of speckled blue littered around the grass. I picked one up, the biggest I could find, and put it in my pocket. Afterwards, they called it an accident. Ground too dry, how unfortunate. That it wasn't unheard of, that children played with fire. Dumb, but not unheard of. The funeral was closed casket, and the adults agreed it was better if I didn't attend. Her mom gave me a lock of her hair, though, tied in a piece of blue ribbon. I still have it. I brought it here, the memory box. I think I know why. My childhood wasn't a happy one, but there were pieces of it that made me who I am today. The one Barbie I owned back then, hair turned into a giant, messy knot from years of play. The piece of eggshell, still blue and speckled, some crayons, the lock of hair, just random stuff I've saved. This morning, when I came in from a walk on the beach, it was sitting on the kitchen counter, the blue matchbox. I know I hadn't taken it out. I am as certain as can be. The sunlight hit it just right, then, catching on the worn blue enamel. The lid was slightly open, and I could see the red tips of the matches that remained. Now, in the dark, my eyes keep drifting toward the yellow house, the one that wasn't empty that summer. Its apple trees have grown wild and bumpy, bending under their own weight, their crowns rippled with red apples, ready for picking. They look crisp. I can see her, every so often, standing below the biggest one, a small figure, dressed in white, with blue ribbons in her blonde hair that catches the light just so. When I blink, she's gone. I think I'll bring the matchbox to the hill tomorrow, just to put it back where it belongs. It feels as if she's getting closer, and it scares me. Whenever I close my eyes, I can smell the sea and the smoke. Thank you for watching Nightmare Proof. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to keep nightmares alive. Have a story of your own? Send it in and you may hear it here next time. Until then, sleep well, if you can.